So guys, I wanted to do something a little bit different for today's video. I feel like more often than not, I'm always asking myself questions on which player I would rather have, how much do I realistically think is a given player's ceiling for their career, or who was the better player all time. Because, everyone does that, right? They're just thinking of basketball scenarios all day. And I know this channel, I've done a couple mailbags where I answer your questions, but in today's video, I want to ask you guys the questions that I've kind of always been curious about, and I want to hear your answers. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. So I love doing the hot takes videos and the mailbag videos where I react and answer your guys' questions. But like I said, I always have a host of general questions myself that I'm always curious to know from other Bulls fans and what their opinion is on those. So what I'm going to do is ask 5 questions related to the Bulls, and I want you to answer them in the comments with question 1, 2, 3, etc. You can only answer 1 or 2. You don't have to answer any of them if you don't want to. And I'll also briefly provide my take on the questions and why I'm asking it. And then finally, because I've enjoyed your guys' hot take so much, I'm going to end the video with a hot take of my own, and I want to see your guys' reaction to it. So I'm going to start off with the first question, and actually it's kind of 3 questions in one, but it relates to Zach Lavine. Would you trade Zach Lavine for Zion Williamson straight up? Would you trade him for Luka Doncic straight up? And then finally, would you trade him for Kevin Durant? Now again, all of these, assumes that the money would work in a straight trade, which it wouldn't given that Luka and Zion are on rookie deals and Kevin Durant is on a max contract. But again, this is all hypothetical. So we're just going to say that all of these are straight trades. Now, the reason this question sparked my interest is because I actually had someone a few days ago in the comments ask me what it would take for me to be okay with in trading for Zach Lavine. And so I started thinking about it more and, certain player scenarios that I would be okay with. And I thought of guys like Giannis, Kawhi Leonard. I mean, those are no-brainers in my view. You would trade Zach Lavine for those guys. Even LeBron is questionable because, LeBron is a better player than Lavine. There's no question about that. But he's also 36, and if you're thinking about building for the future, it might not be the best move. So these were 3 guys that I came up with that were, a bit debatable for me, right? 2 that are young players, younger than Lavine. They're already all-stars and have a lot of future potential. I mean, Luka and Zion are the potential faces of the league in the future, but maybe not necessarily as established as Zach is as a player. And then of course Kevin Durant, an older player who has had some issues with injuries in the past, but is still playing at a superstar level at the age of 32. And I have to say, I really struggle with this one. I mean, first and foremost, I'm not a fan of Kevin Durant at all, mainly for what, he did going to the Warriors to chase rings and not, now trying to build a super team with the Nets. But obviously, he's a hell of a player, a future Hall of Famer. And yes, he is a better player right now than Zach Lavine. He's actually putting up career-type numbers in his 13th season in the league. However, I think given Durant's age and, where Lavine is at right now, if we're talking about building for the future, then obviously you kind of have to go with Lavine. I would probably still take Kevin Durant in this scenario just because he's a big-time superstar. He's an established player that actually has championship experience. And despite the age, I mean, he's not really showing any signs of declining, at least not at this point in time. So I would probably have to go with Kevin Durant on that one. Then for the other 2, in Zion and Luka, I mean, both of these guys are already great players and have so much potential for the future, especially Zion. I would tend to lean towards you have to make those trades for either of those players. I mean, Zion, there are questions about, his durability long term and whether or not he can actually stay healthy. But at the end of the day, I think, the future for both of those guys is probably going to be brighter than Zach Lavine's. But let me know what you guys think of that. My next question for you guys, question number 2. If you had to choose between Zach Lavine and Patrick Williams, who would you rather have on the roster? So the general consensus when it comes to trade targets, that these 2 players are untouchable for the Bulls, Lavine and Patrick Williams, which I agree with. But what if you could only keep one? So on one hand, you have Zach Lavine, who is already an established player, an all-star, and continues to get better and better every year. And then on the other, you have a 19-year-old rookie who has shown a lot of promise and potential with his skill set, but he's young, and you don't know if he's going to actually pan out in the long run and ultimately be a better player than Lavine. I honestly go back and forth on this one, so would love to hear what your guys' answer is. Next question, question number 3. At their peak, which player would you rather have on this current Bulls roster? Dennis Rodman or Joakim Noah? The question, this came to mind for me when I was making the video from a couple days ago on how the Bulls need more energy and hustle type players, especially on the defensive end. And of course, when I was thinking back to some of the best hustle and energy type players in Bulls franchise history, there have been a lot, by the way, but the first two guys that come to mind were Noah and Rodman. This one is really tough for me because I really, really like Noah. He's one of my favorite all-time players. And then, of course, you have Rodman, one of the best rebounders of all time, and a huge piece in that second three-peat. I would probably give the edge slightly to Noah, though, which I know sounds crazy, but I just loved his infectious energy that he brought to the team and how guys fed off that energy for every game. Rodman obviously was a better rebounder. They were pretty on par in terms of their overall defensive abilities, but of course Rodman did have a lot of off-court issues, which is part of the reason why I would go with Noah, given you wouldn't have to worry about him getting suspended for games on whether or not, it was an off-court or on-court violations. But obviously Rodman was an incredible player, and he would be exactly what the Bulls would need, both Noah and Rodman really. Question number 4, who is your favorite player of all time that was not a Chicago Bull? Pretty simple on this one. I feel like most of us as Bulls fans, we're always going to be biased to current or former Bulls players as our favorites, but who is your number one that never actually wore a Bulls uniform? For me, I've got to go with Tim Duncan. In my opinion, the best power forward of all time, 5-time champion. He was always a class act. I know he wasn't the most exciting player, but that's kind of what I liked about him. He was just tough and down to basics, a great basketball player that was a true competitor. And finally, question number 5. Who would you rather keep between Lauri Markkanen and Wendell Carter Jr.? I feel like this question has been asked so much recently, and honestly, it's probably, going to be a reality in the Bulls needing to choose between one of these two guys in the future. I lean more towards Markkanen because I do think he is a better player between the two. The Bulls would still need to find a center regardless, so if you brought in a center, you essentially have to choose between Wendell and Lauri at the 4, and because Lauri can spread the floor more easily with his ability to shoot outside, I think his offensive skill is more valuable than Wendell's defense at that position. Now, as far as my hot take, and this one is pretty bold, at some point in the next 2 seasons, the Bulls will have acquired one of Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, or Michael Porter Jr. I feel like given the close connection that Arturas has with his former team, and the players that he still maintains relationships with despite no longer working for them, enables Arturas to keep that network and line of communication open, to have at least one of these guys come to Chicago, whether when they're free agents or via a trade, once the Bulls have started showing progress in the right direction on a path towards contention. It's bold, I know, that's why it's a hot take, but my hope is that Arturas will be able to influence some of these former Nuggets players to come play for him in a bigger market at that point, hopefully, because he's this, established a good rounded team in Chicago, and he's built those relationships with the Nuggets players who have stated time and again how much they respect him as an executive, a mentor, and a friend. Speaking of which, the Bulls will be playing the Nuggets tomorrow, so hopefully the guys can show up well and make a case for some of these guys to make a move to Chicago. Hopefully we don't see a repeat of what we saw last night. So I'd love to hear your guys' answers to the 5 questions I mentioned, as well as your reaction to the hot take. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.